to start this discussion with the ideological side before we get into the technical
Sure.
side that you specialize in.
Sure.
And on the ideological side, my concern is that it's been crystal clear since the Industrial Revolution that America is an energy-based economy. That's what we base the majority of our quality of life is on available energy. And we will continue to be an energy-based economy for some time. Currently, we are, in effect, a petroleum or fossil fuels-based economy, since that's our primary source of energy in this country. And as long as we're getting the majority of our fossil fuels from outside of this country, we are dependent, our quality of life is dependent on others. That's a great concern of mine. If this country has cheap, readily available base power, we will have an increased quality of life. With readily available power, we will have maglev trains, we will have new medical technology, we will be able to desalinate water. There are a lot of things that are available if ready power is available. We will never have that quality of life and not be dependent on somebody else unless we have a great source of base power, and that, in my opinion, is going to be nuclear energy.
Mike, I think that's probably a pretty good observation. I mean, everybody talks about solar power and wind power and so forth, but you've hit the nail on the head with respect to baseload power. If solar power is subject to daylight versus nighttime, wind is subject to when the wind is blowing, and nuclear is something that can run around the clock and provide that baseline power that you're talking about.
Renewable energy is wonderful, and there's a number of sources that. And geothermal power here in the state of Nevada can provide some base load power since it's available most of the time, but it does not have near the quantity of power generating capacity that's needed for Nevada or the rest of the United States.
Exactly.
I'm looking at base load power
Oh,
for
absolutely.
the entire United States.
And Mike, there's a further problem with regard to solar, geothermal, you name it. Southern Nevada is one of the principal parts of the country where one could look to develop the solar technologies, and we don't have the capability to remove the electricity from Southern Nevada. The transmission lines don't exist. So it's a complex issue that we have to deal with.
Well, I want to talk about that for just a minute, because I've had the opportunity as mayor and as a candidate for governor to meet with a lot of very, very knowledgeable, talented people in this area. And one of the things that I've come to discover that on a broad spectrum, energy policy decisions are one of the longest term decisions you can make. They're typically at least 20-year policy decisions that just to be able to film this show and to be able to broadcast it to you and to turn the lights on in your house is a function of decisions that were made 20 years ago. How are we going to generate that power? Is it going to be gas, clean coal, hydroelectric? How are we going to transmit it? Where are we going to put it on the grid? How are we going to distribute it to your household, whether it's a local power country or Nevada Energy? What we're talking about are 20-year decisions.
That's right.
And what concerns me is we have not made policy decisions for decades in this country. And as you get involved in those discussions, I want to share with you an interesting story. One of the other experts, and I use that term very sincerely, that I've had a chance to listen to extensively on this, is Linda Lingle. Linda is the governor of Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
And she's unique in this discussion because the rest of the country is part of the grid. Meaning if you put power onto the grid, it's distributed so globally across the country that it kind of melds in. But Linda, if she makes an energy policy decision, she knows that month what the effect of that decision is. She can tell you the cost because every bit of energy they had to bring in from somewhere else.
Exactly.
And so she's become quite an expert. And while her policy decisions may have effects that come about much quicker, they give us kind of a microcosm of how policy decisions would work here in the United States.
Exactly.
Of course, you know, the greatest source of energy in Hawaii sits in Pearl Harbor in all of those nuclear-powered subs that sit out there. They can generate as much power as everything else does on that in that country. And so it's been great to be able to talk about energy policy with a lot of these experts. And I've been concerned that as we talk about energy policy, without going into the detail, I'm going to say it's nuclear. That's really the future. And one of the big decisions is, what do we do with the waste stream? And we hear this all the time.
Right.
Okay, when I first started getting involved, I heard that, well, France reprocesses
Right.
nuclear waste. The technology they're using, from what I understand, is probably 50-year-old American technology.
Well, it's based on that. It's been improved since then, but yes, you're right.
And it's a chemical technology.
Right. What reprocessing means is to take the nuclear fuel out of the reactors, and you're basically taking the uranium that's mixed in with other things to make the fuel for the reactor, and you have to dissolve that. And we're talking about very strong ceramics and metals that these pellets are encapsulated in, and then you have to dissolve that and chemically treat it, and you recover the uranium and you recover the plutonium. Everything else today we really don't have a use for, and that's the issue that we're facing with regard to reprocessing. And you've nailed it right on the head. This is a 20 or 30 or 40 year future decision that we're talking about, to get to the type of reprocessing that the country would like to get to, where we have new reactor technologies and where we're able to actually consume some of these waste products. That's not going to happen tomorrow. This is not a Hawaii situation. This is, we're going to have to take things that work in the laboratory, that we're confident that we can make them work on a more industrial or commercial scale, and then we have to start building them up. We have to build a pilot plant to make sure it works, and eventually we have to build the new reprocessing technologies and the new reactors. That is at least 20 years from today.
I've never been interested, I want to tell you that, in getting a stipend, a payment for storing someone else's trash. I don't think anybody is. I am interested in jobs. You just described to me 20 years of industry.
Right.
Not a little industry, a major industry.
Exactly.
Developing a new technology and basically being able to import the best and the brightest to Nevada, give them great jobs, great education, and export ideas. There's probably nothing better than ideas to be able to export as a key component of Nevada.
Right.
Where they're not leaving with our gold and our silver, they're leaving with our brain power.
That's right.
That's
Right.
that's a beautiful product
Yes,
to be
is.
able to generate.
Yeah.
So let me ask you about this. You mentioned a pilot plant.
Right.
Now I'm familiar enough with how heavy elements work to know that if you bombard an element with energy, with
Neutrons,
neutrons,
for example, right.
it's going to do one of two things. It's either going to fission and,
Right.
and release a tremendous amount of energy,
Right.
and we don't do that anymore. Not above ground, or not in the
Right,
States
right.
anymore. We don't set off fissionable bombs
Right.
anymore. But if it doesn't fission, then it's going to absorb neutrons, and
Right.
you become heavier.
Right.
You know, that's the process where we create, enriched uranium or plutonium.
Well, let me try that. This is a yes, but, okay? Within the nuclear reactor, we're actually fissioning the uranium in a controlled process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and the idea of a fission reactor, excuse me, would be to have that type of process, and the new technologies we're looking for are technologies where the things that are wastes today, americium, neptunium, things like that, could be consumed in these types of reactors. Current reactors don't do that, and the future generation that we're looking at, the pilot plants I'm talking about, would be a reactor that would burn all of these products, so that the things that now we're looking at putting in a repository, or depending on where the Blue Ribbon Commission goes, storing them somewhere else, would be actually fuel for the new reactors.
And that's interesting to me. Like I said, I'm not interested in storing someone else's garbage,
Right.
but if we can develop technology that allows us to store future fuels,
Right.
future valuable fuels,
Right.
that's something I'm very interested in.
Right.
Talk to me, Dr. Vogel, for just a minute about this concept that's come to me, and I want to share you again. I'll share the kind of the political
All right.
side, and you can get technical
All right.
about it.
All right.
I took a position in favor of nuclear technology and using the Nevada test site and Yucca Mountain as part of this nuclear
Right.
technology
Right.
baseline area, I guess you'd
Okay.
call it.
Yeah.
And I got a letter from somebody opposing that position. No surprise. And I got an interesting part, two arguments opposing this literally in the same paragraph, and one argument said, well, you could never build a pilot plant out there because there's not enough water to cool it. out there. And then literally in the very next sentences, and you know, one of the other problems we have out there's a giant aquifer right underneath Yucca Mountain that you might contaminate.
Right.
Well, I can't answer those. I'm not a geologist, whether there's an aquifer of water or there's no water, one of the two. Are there other ways to cool a plant than water, or do we have enough water? Can you address any of that?
Well, yes. There is water at the test site, okay, and it's potentially contaminated from some of the nuclear weapons tests, not necessarily in the southern part of the test site, but certainly in the northern part of the test site. When people develop technologies 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it was convenient to just run the water through and wash it out and flush it away and do something else and not have to worry about recycling. We don't have to do that. There are lots of ways that we can recapture and recycle and reuse water. I think that we can look at technologies. I mean, these are research ideas that would actually be more efficient. We're looking at that at solar right now. The differences in the solar technology, two of which would use, or three of which would use the sun to generate electricity, would use vastly different amounts of water. And one that you would think would use a lot of water, just by adjusting the way they use the technology, they're able to use less water. How are we going to know that if we don't try these research programs? We have to look at this. We have to develop it. And that's exactly what a pilot plant is. It's something to test out an idea, to see that if it works at a scale that's bigger than a test tube in a laboratory, before you make the decision about spending a lot of money to build a full-scale plant.
I'm hearing a lot about scaling, about different sizes of plants. I'm going to tell you, I grew up in the Phoenix, Arizona area, and just out west of Phoenix is, I don't know if it's the largest, but one of the largest nuclear power plants in the world is the Palo Verde plant. And it's big. I mean, it is really big. I've flown over it, and I've walked it and toured it, and I've actually stood on the edge of their pools and looked down at the stored nuclear, the spent fuel that they have there. But then also, I happen to know that we have really small nuclear reactors parked in the back of our submarines.
Yes.
And so somewhere in between the back end of a submarine and Palo Verde, there's got to be various scales of nuclear power plants.
Well, you know, I know you know the answer. How did they build a nuclear power plant in the middle of the desert outside of Phoenix?
And the answer is?
What are they using for the cooling water?
Tell me.
They're recycling the wastewater.
They're using effluent from the city of Phoenix.
Yes.
Okay. I like that idea.
Yeah.
I like that idea. Now, in Las Vegas, we're not going to pump our effluent up to the northwest.
Right.
We actually already have a use for effluent in Las Vegas in Clark County. But if we build these technologies elsewhere in the state, treated effluent is a very real answer. Tell me about these technologies. I've heard the term gas-cooled reactors or pebble bed reactors, and
there are. This is a perfect example of the reactor technology that was selected nearly, I guess, 1955 is when we had the first commercial power plant in the United States. So that's 55 years ago.
Okay.
Right? That was one technology out of many. My understanding is the people that developed these technologies had sketches all over their walls of different ways to do these types of reactors and continue to have these ideas. We picked one. Okay, that doesn't mean there weren't 20 other ones that would have worked differently or perhaps better. This is what we're talking about. Fundamentally, when we're talking about reprocessing today, we're talking about new reactor technologies that would build from this reprocessing and use the nuclear materials differently. So anything's on the table right now. This is pure research. We're talking about the advances that have been made in physics, engineering, and science over 55 years. And there's no way. I mean, look at anything sitting in this room around us wasn't, you could say this wasn't here 20 years ago, this wasn't here 10 years ago. You look in your pocket, this wasn't here 5 years ago. Look at the technological advances this country is capable of. And you just can't convince me that we shouldn't put some research effort into trying to better our lives.
Absolutely. And, one of the various spins that I get all the time is, how many billions has the government spent on Yucca Mountain so far? Well, it's very clear. We have to know it's the ratepayers that are spending. It's going through a government channel, but for decades now, the ratepayers who use nuclear power all across the country have been paying into a pool.
Correct.
And billions and billions of dollars of that money have been spent on Yucca Mountain so far, but there are billions left, tens of billions
That's right.
left.
That's right.
I hear different numbers, but it's probably 20 billion plus.
When the numbers that you most commonly see will add in interest that the government has earned by investing this money rather than spending it, you can find numbers easily in the high 20 billions, excuse me.
Yeah, so we've got literally billions of dollars that are available for the technology, not only available, but mandated. The federal government requires that everybody who produces nuclear power, that those people be involved financially
Right.
in the process of disposing of that nuclear waste. And so that money is still out there. It's money that's available. The industry is going to continue to invest in figuring out what to do with
Right.
that fuel stream, that waste stream. It is crazy to think that we're going to spend this much time and money and not come out of it with a new technology,
Right.
not
Right.
come out of it with new industry. So talk to me a few minutes on your thoughts on this 80,000 page application that's now that's sitting before the
Right.
the Nuclear Energy Commission
This
or the EPA. Or
Yeah, it's in front of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. This is the life's work of a lot of us scientists and engineers. And I want to, what you read in the paper, what you hear Senator Reid say here's Secretary Chu being critical of, is that somehow that this document has gotten through to the point where a really large number of credible scientists signed their name to this and said, this is great science, this is ready to go and be defended in court to prove that Yucca Mountain is a safe place to do it. Well, that application went to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in June of 2008, and it had the force of the scientists who worked on that program. People like me who were there for decades who said, this is right. We did not send that document over there lightly. We spent a lot of time, a lot of people have to sign off on it. Now, it's sitting there, and everything that we can see from the reviews that have taken place by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to date, and you can judge that by the types of questions they're asking. This is their process. They've got 18 months to look at this document and see if they accept it. And you can get a good feeling from how good the document is by the types of questions they're asking. And the questions they're asking, the Department of Energy scientists have been able to answer them. And so I think most people on, let me call it our side, the people who submitted the license application, think we put a pretty good document in there, and we thought we could demonstrate Yucca Mountain was safe. Within the past week or so, NRC Commissioner Klein commented on this very same issue, and he said he couldn't guarantee that Yucca Mountain was licensable. That's the end result of a court case. But he saw no reason to conclude that it was not worth taking this program forward. You know, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission had not objected to it. They'd not thrown it out. They'd not raised questions that couldn't be answered. And so you're sitting here where we were supposed to be under the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. We finished the work that we thought we needed to do. We wrote the license application, submitted to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and we thought, honestly, literally by this point in time, we would be hearing from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that they were willing to accept our document and take the next step, which would be take it to the court case.
Okay, you know, that's fascinating, and I want to ask this question then. Several times in what you just said, you referred to we. And you said, you know, our team, the people involved in this. So over your 20 years doing that, you developed a lot of relationships.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And you worked with a lot of scientists.
Absolutely.
Do you still consider them friends?
I certainly do.
Do you hang out with them here in Nevada?
Hang out with some of them here in Nevada, yes.
That's my question. Where are they?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. With the actions that have been taken by the administration in budget space, DOE has been having to let these contractors and scientists go. They've been laid off. And I had dinner with one last night, and he's looking for a new job. He has an interview up at Hanford, and he's likely to go up to Hanford and leave the state. There's nothing in the process today with no federal budgets, continuing resolution type situation, not much chance of knowing what the budgets are going to be until probably after the election, and an administrative position that said make Yucca Mountain go away. These people are being laid off, and they are leaving the state.
Absolutely, and these are people that were being paid out of these nuclear waste fund fees.
Right.
So not out of our taxes, but out of what we paid in energy.
Right, paid for by the energy tax.
So we had jobs here high-skilled jobs, and I ask this question just because, you know, I have a niece who went through school to become a nuclear scientist. And she worked hard at it for several years, and everywhere she went, taking an incredible talent pool with her, the programs just kept getting cut right and left.
Oh, right.
For studying advances in this technology. And, you know, she now works for a park service. She's literally left the industry. And it concerns me that we talk about jobs every day, right, and we're pro-job, but we're anti-industry. We're pro-job, but we're anti-business. And it just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. And again, that's kind of a rhetorical question. I'm not asking a scientist like yourself to address that
right.
one. And, you know, I'm grateful that you're still here in Nevada. But it does concern me that in other outside conversations, I've talked with you about very specific doctors and scientists, right, and people involved who you say are gone, not here anymore.
Yeah.
We could ask this person this question, but they're off to another state or another industry, right, or looking for a job like your other friend right now. Yeah. It concerns me greatly. I want to say this, and I'll get back to the political side and tell you that's my intention as governor of this state, to not spend 1 minute of my time or my resources or state's resources fighting Yucca Mountain. I will not fight jobs. I will not fight industry. I intend to fight for industry, to get out of the way when somebody's attempting to bring industry my direction. You know, they always say when, you know, never murder a man who's committing suicide, or never correct someone when they're making a mistake.
Right.
Here, but also never get in the way of something good when it's happening. Right. You know that, and it's really a concern of mine that we've got the law of the land that says, right, by violating this law, we've essentially said America is not interested in being energy independent. That's how I view it. I'm not putting words in your mouth. No. I've said America is not interested in being energy independent unless you know, and you can say as a scientist, do you know of some other technology that would make us independent of fossil fuels?
No. It's, I mean, I'm sorry I don't have the statistics with me. I actually have them on cards. I usually read them to people. But the amount of energy that's generated in this country by things like geothermal, solar, wind, combined is a few percent. All right, and you know, you talked about petroleum and coal. That's half. Nuclear is 20. I mean, hydro, which is not renewable, we're never going to build another dam in this country. That's where the power in this country comes from. Okay, we're not going to build another dam, so that's not a potential source. We want to not be so reliant on the foreign sources of oil. Coal is a diminishing resource, and a lot of people don't believe we can treat that as a clean resource. There's nothing left but nuclear.
That's true. You know, I hear stories that, you know, up in North Dakota, Montana, we've got huge oil reserves here in the United States. But even if we do open and tap those oil reserves, those can carry us for decades at best.
Right.
And that's a wonderful stopgap on being energy independent in the time that it takes to develop really good nuclear technology. But there's still a stopgap. We cannot continue to exist until we win this race. You know, we hear this all the time. China's going to beat us in this race. They're not only going to build 70 new plants before we build our next plant, but they'll develop new technology if we don't. And in Nevada, once this country catches on, other states will beat us to the punch on this technology. And I'm not going to let that happen. I intend for Nevada to be a competitive state in every function. We're going to work harder, drive faster, and do it better than everybody else. And that's what Nevada's famous for. And we're going to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and create not only a new industry, but a great industry. So I'm thrilled about the opportunities. I don't believe Yucca is dead. Or as Huck Finn said, or Tom Sawyer said, the reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated.